The early morning light cast long shadows across Manhattan's concrete canyons as Sarah Chun adjusted her worn cleaning uniform in the employee bathroom of Sterling and Morrison, Wall Street's most prestigious investment firm. The mirror reflected a carefully constructed image, graying hair pulled back in a practical bun, minimal makeup artfully applied to suggest age rather than enhance beauty, and shoulders slightly hunched to make her 5'7" frame appear smaller. At 52, she had mastered the art of invisibility. "Another day of being unseen," she whispered to her reflection, a hint of amusement in her dark eyes. What the mirror didn't show was the woman who had orchestrated some of Asia's largest corporate takeovers, who controlled investment funds worth billions, and who had spent the last 18 months orchestrating the most elaborate corporate infiltration in Wall Street history. The bathroom door swung open, and Amanda Torres, a junior analyst, burst in, already typing frantically on her phone. She barely registered Sarah's presence, just as she hadn't noticed her the countless other mornings they'd shared this space. Sarah quietly gathered her cleaning supplies and shuffled out, letting her features settle into the blank expression expected of the building's maintenance staff. Outside, New York was awakening to another day of financial warfare. Yellow cabs honked their way through gridlocked streets as armies of ambitious young professionals powered through the doors of Sterling and Morrison's gleaming 60-story tower, clutching coffee cups and dreams of wealth like shields against the world. Sarah pushed her cleaning cart into the executive elevator, pressing the button for the 58th floor. As the doors closed, she caught a glimpse of Michael Reynolds, the firm's star trader, rushing forward. "Hold it," he called out. But Sarah deliberately pressed the closed door button, knowing exactly how he would react. When the elevator eventually delivered Reynolds to the trading floor 10 minutes later, he stormed past her cleaning cart, muttering loudly to his colleague, "These service people, I swear to God, no concept of time or courtesy. Some of us have actual money to make." Sarah kept her head down, but her mind was already calculating. Reynolds' trading patterns had been growing increasingly erratic over the past month. His recent focus on certain Asian technology stocks suggested he was acting on information that hadn't yet hit the market, information that could only have come from illegal sources. She made her way through the trading floor, emptying trash bins and wiping surfaces, all while her trained ear picked up fragments of conversations. "The Zhang account is showing unusual activity. Morrison wants the Singapore deal closed by Friday. The SEC's sniffing around the tech sector again." Each piece of information was carefully filed away in her mind, adding to the massive puzzle she had been assembling since she first donned the cleaning uniform 18 months ago. The plan had been years in the making, but patience had always been Sarah's greatest strength. 25 years earlier, Sarah Chun had arrived at JFK Airport with $200 in her pocket and an acceptance letter to Columbia Business School's PhD program in financial engineering. The scholarship covered her tuition, but everything else, food, rent, survival in the world's most expensive city, would depend on her own ingenuity. Her journey had begun in a small village outside Beijing, where her grandmother had raised her after her parents' death in a factory accident. Power, her grandmother had taught her, is like the wind. The truly powerful move silently, seen only by their effects on others. Those words had shaped Sarah's approach to life, business, and eventually, revenge. By day, she had attended classes, impressing professors with her brilliant mathematical models. By night, she had worked as a cleaner in office buildings much like this one, learning the invisible paths through corporate America's corridors of power. She discovered that no one noticed the cleaning staff, which meant no one guarded their words around them. Traders discussed insider tips, executives plotted strategies, assistants gossiped about affairs, and Sarah absorbed it all. Her first big break had come during the dot-com bubble, while working as a junior quantitative analyst at a small trading firm. She had developed an algorithm that predicted market crashes with unprecedented accuracy. When the bubble burst, her predictions had made her first million. But instead of flaunting her success, she had remained in her tiny apartment, living frugally and reinvesting every penny. The 2008 financial crisis had transformed her millions into billions. She had seen the crash coming months before anyone else, not through complex mathematical models, but through the conversations she overheard while cleaning the offices of mortgage brokers and rating agencies. When Wall Street burned, Sarah Chun had emerged as one of the most powerful women in Asian finance, though few knew her face or name. Now, as she pushed her cleaning cart past the office of James Morrison III, Sterling and Morrison's CEO, Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Morrison was everything she despised about Wall Street: arrogant, corrupt, and completely convinced of his own invulnerability. His firm had destroyed countless lives during the financial crisis, profiting from the misery of others while hiding behind legal technicalities. But his real crime, the one that had brought Sarah Chun out of the shadows, was more personal. The executive floor buzzed with nervous energy as board members arrived for the quarterly meeting. Sarah positioned her cleaning cart near the boardroom's service entrance, pretending to polish the already gleaming brass handles while her hidden microphones captured every word. James Morrison III stood at the head of the long mahogany table, his silver hair and bespoke suit projecting an image of patrician authority. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "I'm pleased to report another record-breaking quarter. Our Asian division, in particular, has exceeded all expectations." Sarah's attention sharpened. The Asian division's numbers had been troubling her for months. The returns were too good, the timing too perfect. She had seen similar patterns before. In the years leading up to the financial crisis, Elizabeth Parker, the newly appointed head of compliance, cleared her throat. "Mr. Morrison, I have some concerns about the Zhang account. The trading patterns." "Ms. Parker," Morrison cut her off, his tone dismissive. "We've been through this. The board has full confidence in our compliance procedures. Unless you have actual evidence of wrongdoing." Sarah glanced at Elizabeth Parker, noting the frustration in the younger woman's eyes. Parker was one of the few genuinely ethical people in Morrison's inner circle, which was probably why she was being systematically undermined. In another life, they might have been allies. The meeting continued, but Sarah's mind was already racing ahead. The pieces were finally falling into place. Morrison's frequent trips to Singapore, the mysterious Zhang account, the irregular trading patterns, it all pointed to a massive fraud scheme, one that made the 2008 crisis look like a parking violation. As she gathered her cleaning supplies, Sarah's phone buzzed quietly in her pocket. The message was from her team in Hong Kong. Target acquired, evidence secured. It was time. The next morning dawned gray and threatening, heavy clouds hanging low over Manhattan like a prophecy. Sarah arrived earlier than usual, her cleaning cart loaded with different supplies than normal. Today's tools weren't for polishing floors or emptying trash bins. She made her way to the server room on the 59th floor, nodding to the security guard who barely glanced at her cleaning uniform. Inside, she quickly located the maintenance panel she had identified months ago. Within minutes, she had inserted a small device that would give her team remote access to Sterling and Morrison's entire network. Back on the trading floor, Michael Reynolds was already at his desk, shouting into his headset about the Asian markets. Sarah couldn't help but notice the slight tremor in his hands, the sheen of sweat on his forehead. The signs were subtle, but to her trained eye, they screamed of panic. "The Zhang account is dropping." She overheard him hiss into his phone. "Get Morrison on the line now." Sarah checked her watch. Right on schedule. Her team in Hong Kong would be executing their part of the plan, systematically exposing the hidden connections between Sterling and Morrison's Asian division and a network of shell companies designed to hide billions in illegal trades. Elizabeth Parker hurried past, clutching a stack of files to her chest. Her face was pale, but there was a glint of satisfaction in her eyes. Good. The anonymous tip Sarah had arranged to have sent to the SEC was bearing fruit. The morning wore on, tension building like static before a storm. Sarah continued her rounds, watching as the first cracks began to appear in Sterling and Morrison's carefully constructed facade. Trading terminals froze, then displayed error messages. Phones started ringing with increasingly panicked calls from Asian partners. And through it all, Sarah Chun pushed her cleaning cart, invisible and observant. The emergency board meeting was called for noon. Sarah watched as board members rushed into the building, their faces tight with concern. James Morrison III stalked through the lobby, barking orders into his phone, his usual composure cracking around the edges. As the board gathered in the main conference room, Sarah made her final preparations. She ducked into the employee bathroom, emerging minutes later transformed. Gone was the cleaning uniform, replaced by a precisely tailored Chanel suit in charcoal gray. Her hair, freed from its severe bun, fell in elegant waves around her shoulders. Even her posture had changed, power and authority evident in every movement. She strode through the trading floor, enjoying the double takes and confused stares from employees who had spent months looking through her. Michael Reynolds actually dropped his phone when she passed his desk, recognition and horror dawning in his eyes. The boardroom fell silent as she entered. James Morrison III was mid-sentence, his hand frozen in the air as he gestured at a screen displaying plummeting stock prices. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded. "Security." Sarah smiled, the expression both elegant and predatory. "Sarah Chen," she said, her voice carrying easily across the room. "Though you might know me better as the ghost of Shanghai." She enjoyed watching the blood drain from Morrison's face as the name registered. "Or perhaps you remember me as the cleaning lady who's been watching your every move for the past 18 months. The room erupted in chaos. Board members jumped to their feet. Security guards rushed forward only to stop at a gesture from Sarah. On the screens behind Morrison, trading data was replaced by documentation, emails, bank transfers, phone records, all meticulously collected and organized. "What is this?" Theodore Barrett, the board chairman, demanded. "This," Sarah said, taking a seat at the head of the table, "is evidence of the largest financial fraud since 2008. The Zhang account, the Singapore connections, the artificial inflation of Asian market returns. It's all here. And as of 9 minutes ago, it's also in the hands of the SEC, the Financial Times, and every major regulatory body in Asia." Morrison lunged forward, but security guards, now responding to orders from Sarah's earpiece, restrained him. "You can't do this," he sputtered. "You have no authority. I own 27% of Sterling and Morrison." Sarah cut him off. "Acquired through various shells and proxies over the past 5 years. I also own the evidence of every illegal transaction this firm has conducted under your leadership. Would you like me to continue?" The next few hours passed in a blur of accusations, denials, and revelations. Federal agents arrived, led by a team from the SEC's Enforcement Division. James Morrison III was led out in handcuffs, along with several other executives. Michael Reynolds was found attempting to delete files from his computer and was promptly arrested. Sarah watched it all from Morrison's former office, now hers by right of both share ownership and conquest. Elizabeth Parker sat across from her, still processing the day's events. "I've been trying to expose these practices for months," Elizabeth said, shaking her head in amazement. "How did you do it?" "By becoming invisible," Sarah replied. "It's amazing what people will say and do in front of someone they don't really see." She stood and walked to the window, looking out over the Manhattan skyline. "We're going to rebuild this firm, Ms. Parker. Not just its practices, but its culture. No more invisible people. No more ignored voices." "Why did you choose Sterling and Morrison?" Elizabeth asked. "There are plenty of corrupt firms on Wall Street." Sarah was quiet for a moment, remembering, 15 years ago, this firm handled the hostile takeover of Asian United Bank. They used illegal tactics, insider trading, and outright fraud to force the sale. The bank's chairman, an honest man who had built his business from nothing, couldn't handle the shame. He committed suicide. "Your father," Elizabeth guessed softly. "My husband," Sarah corrected. "I was already successful by then, but I was still invisible to firms like Sterling and Morrison. They never knew that the cleaning lady who found his body would one day own their company." Over the next year, Sterling and Morrison underwent a remarkable transformation under Sarah Chen's leadership. The old guard was swept away, replaced by a diverse team of executives chosen for their integrity as much as their expertise. Elizabeth Parker was promoted to Chief Ethics Officer, with a mandate to create the strongest compliance program on Wall Street. Sarah implemented changes that shocked the financial world: transparent fee structures, ethical investment guidelines, and a revolutionary profit-sharing program that included everyone from traders to maintenance staff. Profits initially dropped, but then began to climb as clients were drawn to the firm's new reputation for integrity. She established a foundation in her husband's name, providing educational opportunities for underprivileged students interested in finance. The cleaning staff was brought in-house, given full benefits and stock options. Every morning, she would walk through the building, greeting everyone by name, remembering their stories, ensuring that no one felt invisible. 1 year to the day after her revelation, Sarah stood in the firm's renovated lobby, addressing a crowd of employees, journalists, and financial industry leaders. The occasion was the launch of the firm's new ethical investing initiative, but her message went beyond mere business. Success in finance isn't just about seeing patterns in numbers, she told them. It's about seeing the humanity in every person who walks through these doors, from the CEO to the newest intern, from the traders to the maintenance staff. Everyone deserves to be seen, heard, and respected. She paused, looking out at the faces before her. Some she recognized from her days pushing the cleaning cart. Others were new hires brought in during the firm's transformation. All were listening intently. "I spent 18 months as an invisible woman," she continued, "and I learned that the true character of an organization isn't measured by its profit margins or market share. It's measured by how it treats those who seem to have the least power." Today, we're not just launching a new investment strategy. We're reaffirming our commitment to building a company where no one is invisible. 5 years later, Sarah Chen stood at the window of her office, watching the sun set over Manhattan. Sterling and Morrison had become a model for ethical finance, its practices studied at business schools around the world. The firm's success had sparked a revolution in Wall Street culture, with other companies scrambling to adopt similar policies. The trading floor below was quieter now, the frantic energy of the past replaced by focused determination. She could see Michael Reynolds' old desk, now occupied by a young woman who had come through the Foundation Scholarship Program. The cleaning staff moved through the space with dignity, treated with respect by all. Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from Elizabeth Parker. "SEC just approved our new ethical trading platform. We're good to go." She smiled, remembering her grandmother's words about power being like the wind. The truly powerful were indeed seen only by their effects on others. But sometimes, she had learned, the most powerful thing one could do was to be seen, and to ensure that others were seen as well. As she prepared to leave for the day, she stopped by the maintenance department. The cleaning staff was gathering for the night shift, and she knew many of their names and stories. They were no longer invisible, not to her, not to anyone in the firm. "Good evening, Ms. Chun." They greeted her, without a trace of the old servility. "Good evening," she replied warmly. "Thank you for all you do." Walking out into the New York night, Sarah Chin smiled. The towers of Wall Street still reached for the sky, but something fundamental had changed. In one small corner of the financial world, power was no longer just about money. It was about seeing the worth in every person, regardless of their position. And somewhere, she knew, her grandmother was smiling too. Years later, business schools would study the Sterling and Morrison transformation as a pivotal moment in corporate history. They would analyze the technical brilliance of Sarah Chen's takeover, the legal implications of her methods, and the revolutionary changes she brought to Wall Street culture. 10 years after Sarah Chen's dramatic revelation at Sterling and Morrison, her influence had spread far beyond Wall Street. The firm's ethical investing model had become a template for financial institutions worldwide, and Sarah herself had emerged as a leading voice for corporate reform. But it wasn't just the big changes that defined her legacy. Walking through the building one morning, she passed Jessica Martinez, one of the cleaning staff members who had been with the firm during her undercover days. "Ms. Chen," Jessica called out. "Do you have a moment?" Sarah smiled warmly. "Of course, Jessica. How's your daughter doing at Columbia?" Jessica beamed with pride. "She's thriving. The scholarship from your foundation made it all possible. But that's not why I wanted to talk to you." She hesitated for a moment. "I've been taking those evening business classes you encouraged me to try, and well, I have some ideas about improving our environmental services division." Sarah listened intently as Jessica outlined her proposal for making Sterling and Morrison's cleaning operations more environmentally sustainable while improving efficiency. The presentation was detailed, well-researched, and innovative. "Come to my office tomorrow morning," Sarah said when Jessica finished. "I think it's time we discussed your promotion to Environmental Services Director." The joy and pride in Jessica's eyes reminded Sarah of why she had undertaken this mission in the first place. It wasn't just about revenge or justice. It was about creating opportunities for those who had been overlooked and undervalued. The Young Financiers Program, launched by Sarah's foundation, was holding its annual ceremony in Sterling and Morrison's main auditorium. 100 students from underprivileged backgrounds, all dreaming of careers in finance, sat listening to speakers share their experiences. Sarah watched from the back of the room as Elizabeth Parker, now the firm's president, addressed the group. "When I first met Sarah Chen," Elizabeth was saying, "she taught me that true power isn't about controlling others. It's about empowering them." Among the students, Sarah noticed a young woman who reminded her of herself at that age. Determined, observant, with that same hunger for knowledge and success. After the ceremony, she approached the girl. "What's your name?" Sarah asked. "Mine Nguyen," the girl replied, standing straighter. "I'm from Vietnam originally. My parents run a small grocery store in Queens." Sarah nodded. "And what brings you to our program?" "Meh? I want to change things," I said firmly. "I've watched my parents work 18-hour days, being treated like they're invisible because they don't speak perfect English. I want to build something that helps people like them have a fair chance." Sarah studied the young woman thoughtfully. "Come see me tomorrow. I think we might have a place for you in our summer internship program." Not everything was smooth sailing. Wall Street's old guard hadn't given up their power without a fight, and there were still those who viewed Sterling and Morrison's ethical approach as a threat to their way of doing business. Marcus Wong, once Morrison's protege and now head of a rival firm, had spent years trying to undermine Sarah's reforms. His latest attack came in the form of a hostile takeover attempt, backed by a consortium of traditional investment banks. Sarah sat in her office, reviewing the latest figures with her team. The attack was well-planned and aggressive, but Wong had made one crucial mistake. He had underestimated the loyalty of Sterling and Morrison's employees and clients. "They think we're vulnerable because our profit margins are smaller than traditional firms," Sarah told her executive team. "What they don't understand is that our strength doesn't come from our profit margins. It comes from our people." She launched a counteroffensive that became legendary in financial circles. Instead of fighting the takeover with traditional methods, she opened the books completely, inviting public scrutiny of both Sterling and Morrison and the attacking consortium. The contrast was stark. While Sterling and Morrison's ethical practices stood up to examination, the consortium's methods didn't bear close scrutiny. Within weeks, Wong's attack had backfired spectacularly, leading to investigations of his own firm's practices. Success had its price. Sarah's single-minded focus on her mission had left little room for personal relationships. Now, In her quiet moments, she sometimes wondered about the choices she had made. One evening, as she worked late in her office, she found herself looking at an old photograph of her husband. He would have been proud of what she had accomplished, but would he have approved of her methods? A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. It was Robert Chin, the board member who had once been her classmate in Beijing but had never recognized her during her undercover days. "Sarah," he said hesitantly, "I owe you an apology. All those months, you were right there, and I never saw you. None of us did." She smiled sadly. "That was the point, Robert. We see what we expect to see, and for too long, Wall Street expected to see some people as invisible." As Sterling and Morrison entered its second decade under Sarah's leadership, the financial world had changed dramatically. Other firms had adopted similar ethical practices, either voluntarily or under pressure from investors and regulators. Sarah had begun to think about succession planning. Elizabeth Parker was the obvious choice to take over as CEO, but Sarah wanted to ensure that the firm's commitment to ethical practices and human dignity would continue beyond any single leader. She established the Chun Institute for Ethical Finance, a think tank and training center housed within Sterling and Morrison. The institute would serve as both a watchdog and an incubator for new ideas about how finance could serve society rather than exploit it. The next generation of financial leaders, she told the institute's inaugural class, must understand that true success isn't measured in dollars and cents. It's measured in lives improved, opportunities created, and dignity preserved. 20 years to the day after she had first put on a cleaning uniform to infiltrate Sterling and Morrison, Sarah Chun stood in the lobby of her building, watching the morning crowd arrive. The faces had changed over the years, but the energy was different now, more collaborative, more human. The cleaning staff still moved through the building, but they were no longer invisible. They were valued members of the team, many of them studying in the evening programs Sarah had established, some already moving up through the company's ranks. Jessica Martinez, now Executive Vice President of Environmental Services, passed by with a wave. Ming Nguyen, who had risen from summer intern to head of Asian operations, was deep in discussion with a group of young analysts. Elizabeth Parker, preparing to take over as CEO, was mentoring a new group of compliance officers. Sarah felt a deep satisfaction as she watched them all. She had changed more than just a company. She had changed the way people saw each other. The invisible woman had made everyone visible. That evening, as she prepared to leave the office, she stopped by the maintenance department one last time. The night shift was gathering, just as they had done all those years ago when she was one of them. "Good evening, Ms. Chin," they called out, and she smiled, remembering all the evenings when no one had noticed her at all. "Good evening," she replied warmly. "Thank you for all you do." As she walked out into the New York night, Sarah Chen looked up at the towers of Wall Street, gleaming against the darkening sky. They were different now, not just buildings filled with money and power, but spaces where every person had value, where every voice could be heard. She thought of her grandmother's words about power being like the wind, and she smiled. Sometimes the wind could change direction, and when it did, could change everything in its path.